Rain falls gently over the streets of East London, glistening under amber streetlights as wedding bells echo from a grand South Asian banquet hall. Inside, laughter fills the air, cameras flash, and the scent of jasmine mixes with champagne. Guests dance in celebration of what seems like a perfect love story, an Indian bride marrying into a successful London family. But beneath the music and sparkle, something darker hums, quiet and unseen. Ananya Mehra, radiant in crimson silk, her smile practiced, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she adjusts her veil. Across the hall, her new husband, Arjun Singh, receives blessings from relatives, his face unreadable, proud but distant. The priest chants blessings of eternal unity, while a faint police siren wails in the distance, unheard by anyone inside. Every wedding promises a new beginning, but for Ananya and Arjun, the beginning was also the end. As the night deepens, the scene splits, one side filled with color and laughter, the other bathed in blue light and chaos. The same wedding hall hours later, now surrounded by police tape. Guests stand in shock. Detectives move quickly through scattered petals and shattered glass. A single bridal bangle, smeared with blood, lies abandoned near the door. By midnight, the groom would be in handcuffs, and the bride's lifeless body would be found in her own wedding gown. We rewind through time, flashes of London's skyline, an airplane landing, a nervous bride clutching her passport, and a man waiting at Heathrow with flowers. The narrator draws us into the illusion. In a city far from home, one woman carried a secret she could never reveal, a secret that would destroy two families and ignite a tragedy born from shame. As the rain intensifies, the final shot lingers on the wet pavement where a police car idles, lights flickering red and blue. The sound of distant wedding music fades into silence. This is not just the story of a marriage gone wrong, the narrator says. It is the story of love, lies, and the deadly price of honor. Ananya Mehra was 26 years old, born and raised in a bustling neighborhood in South Delhi. She was the daughter of deeply traditional parents. Her father, a government officer who valued discipline and obedience above all, and her mother, a devoutly religious homemaker who believed a woman's honor was her greatest asset. In their home, girls were raised to be graceful, obedient, and above all, untouched before marriage. But Ananya had always been different. She was ambitious, a top student who had earned a degree in literature from Delhi University, followed by a postgraduate diploma in communications. Her parents boasted about her academic achievements in front of relatives, yet behind closed doors, they reminded her that education was only useful if it helped secure a good match, preferably with a successful Indian man settled abroad. They never spoke openly about sex, dating, or independence. Those things were taboo, the shadows outside the walls of family honor. Yet Ananya had experienced them. During college, she'd fallen deeply in love with a classmate, Arav, a boy from Mumbai who opened her world to love, trust, and rebellion. They'd spent 2 years together, secretly. And yes, they had crossed that invisible line that her parents never dared acknowledge. But their love ended in heartbreak, different cities, different dreams, and eventually silence. That chapter Ananya believed had closed. But not in the eyes of her community. Because in the cultural code she was born into, virginity wasn't just personal, it was political. It determined a girl's worth, her family's reputation, and in some cases, her survival. When her family found a match through an elite matrimonial website, Arjun Singh, a software engineer in London from a respected Sikh family, Ananya was told this was her golden chance. A foreign match, a secure life, a successful man from a cultured family. Arjun's mother called often, asking questions about Ananya's habits, upbringing, and background, especially her medical purity. Her mother pressured her. Just make sure everything is clean. These people ask too many questions. Ananya panicked. Fear wrapped itself around her chest. What if they asked for a medical certificate? What if they rejected her? Would her parents disown her in shame? Would the engagement fall apart? In desperation, she sought out a clinic that specialized in discretion. With help from a friend and a payment under the table, she obtained a fake virginity certificate, a printed document, stamped and sealed, stating she had an intact hymen and no history of sexual activity. It was a lie she convinced herself was necessary. Her heart pounded as she emailed it to Arjun's family. She told herself she was just protecting her future, not hurting anyone. She told herself love and trust would come later, that no one needed to know. But lies have a strange way of bleeding through silk. She wore that secret like an invisible weight as wedding preparations began. The London venue was booked, the visa was processed, and her bridal lehenga was stitched with gold. On the outside, she was every inch the perfect bride. But inside, she was carrying a ticking time bomb, a single lie that, once discovered, would shatter not only her marriage but her life. She thought she could leave the past behind. But the past was waiting, quietly, patiently, ready to kill. Arjun Singh was 30 years old and had lived in London for nearly a decade. A senior IT systems engineer at a multinational firm, he was considered a quiet success story in his community, the immigrant son who had done everything right. A clean record, a good job, a permanent residency, and enough savings to send money home to Punjab every month. He drove a modest Audi, lived in a shared flat in East Ham, and video-called his parents in Amritsar every Sunday evening without fail. To his family, Arjun wasn't just a son, he was a symbol, their only child, their pride, their proof that traditional values could survive on foreign soil. But Arjun lived in tension between two worlds that never quite aligned. By day, he was surrounded by coworkers who joked about Tinder, hookups, and weekend getaways. By night, he retreated into a world where marriage was sacred, family honor absolute, and a woman's purity was non-negotiable. He drank beer with colleagues at after-work meetups, but never told his mother. He attended Diwali parties hosted by other Indian expats but left early to avoid gossip. His mind was modern, but his heart was still tethered to tradition. His parents had made it clear for years. They wanted him to marry a girl from India. Not just any girl, but a cultured, clean, sanskari girl, a virgin. Preferably one who'd never had a boyfriend, never been kissed, never had her name whispered in any neighborhood gossip. Arjun wasn't blind to the double standard, but deep down he had absorbed it. So when a distant relative introduced the Mehra family, whose daughter Ananya was not only well-educated and attractive, but also from a good Delhi family, Arjun was interested. On video calls, Ananya was polite, soft-spoken, and modestly dressed. She had a literature degree and a charming, almost old-fashioned way of speaking. She even touched her fingers to her forehead in greeting, a sign of traditional upbringing. "She's exactly the kind of girl who won't embarrass you," his mother had said. "Not like these Western girls." Arjun believed it. When Ananya's family offered to take care of the wedding costs and mentioned a sizable gift, not outright dowry, but close, his parents considered it a sign of respect. Everything seemed perfect. But in the weeks leading up to the wedding, small things gave him pause. Ananya seemed unusually nervous during pre-marriage discussions. She deflected any topic related to intimacy or medical tests. When his mother asked about her medical proof, a disturbing but common request in many conservative circles, Ananya sent over a scanned document, neat and stamped. It should have satisfied him. But something about the timing, the rushed way she emailed it, unsettled him. His friends noticed it too. "She's beautiful, man," his friend Nikhil told him, "but she seems off. You sure she's being real with you?" Arjun brushed it off. He told himself it was wedding stress. He didn't want to question too much, he wanted this to work. He detold his family, the venue was booked, flights were arranged, gifts exchanged. There was no turning back. Still, a quiet doubt lodged itself in the back of his mind. A part of him was proud, he had fulfilled every expectation. But another part, hidden even from himself, was deeply insecure. Insecure about whether he was enough. Insecure about being respected as a man, as a husband. That insecurity simmered beneath the surface, waiting. When the truth came out on their wedding night, when he discovered the document was fake, something in him snapped. And a man torn between two cultures chose the worst parts of both. The day of the wedding dawned gray and damp over East London, but inside the grand South Asian banquet hall, everything glittered like a Bollywood dream. Gold brocade curtains framed a stage draped in deep maroon and cream. Crystal chandeliers hung above rows of chairs covered in silk. Outside, Rolls-Royces lined the street, their license plates fogged by the drizzle. Inside, the scent of jasmine and sandalwood filled the air as dole players rehearsed their beats and relatives, adjusted sequined dupattas and stiff turbans. The Singh and Mehra families had spared no expense. Hundreds of guests crowded the hall, cousins flown in from India, old school friends from Canada, London uncles in perfectly tailored suits. Cameras flashed as soon as the bride stepped into view. Ananya wore a crimson lehenga stitched with antique gold thread and a long veil heavy with stones. She moved slowly, almost floating, yet if one looked closely, her hands trembled as she adjusted her bangles. Her lips curled into a soft smile for the photographers, but her eyes darted nervously from one side of the hall to the other, searching for something only she knew. Across the room, Arjun waited on the stage in a cream sherwani, his expression calm but unreadable. He looked like the perfect groom, tall, dignified, proud. Yet even as he smiled at friends, his mother leaned over and whispered something in his ear, her eyes flicking toward the bride. Guests later recalled those glances, like she was checking if Ananya fit the image she'd built. Some whispered about the bride's modern habits in Delhi, the gossip reaching London before the girl herself had arrived. Ananya, meanwhile, rehearsed her lies in her head like mantras. Everything will be fine, no one will find out, tonight will be the beginning of my new life. She clasped the fake certificate tightly in her bridal pouch as if it were an amulet. Every time she caught Arjun's eye, she smiled brighter, even as a sick feeling pooled in her stomach. A bridesmaid noticed it first, the way Ananya's chest rose too fast, the way she blinked back tears just before the firas began. She looked like someone about to run away, the woman later told police. But the rituals moved forward, the sacred fire crackled, the priest chanted, and family members showered the couple with rose petals. Cameras captured the perfect tableau, a bride and groom circling the fire, their garments knotted, their futures entwined. To the guests it looked flawless. They smiled through everything, one uncle said later, but her eyes looked haunted. When the vows were done, applause echoed through the hall. The couple posed for photographs, held hands for blessings, and cut a cake as waiters poured champagne. Under the golden lights, Ananya tried to breathe. She laughed at jokes, she thanked relatives, she walked beside Arjun like a woman stepping into a fairy tale. But inside, her heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear. Then, as the music faded and the guests left, the scene changed. Hours later, the same hall glowed blue with the flashing lights of metropolitan police cars. Outside, the drizzle had turned into a hard rain, streaking down the glass doors. Inside, chairs stood overturned, petals scattered across the marble floor. Guests who had returned for forgotten items found officers taping off corridors. A single bridal bangle lay on the ground, smeared with blood. It had looked like a wedding, but by midnight it had become a crime scene. The wedding had ended in a whirl of color and sound. The final guests left just after midnight, their laughter echoing into the damp London streets as the newlyweds disappeared into the elevator of a luxury hotel nearby. The honeymoon suite, reserved months in advance by the groom's family, was lavish. White orchids on the table, a bottle of champagne on ice, silk sheets neatly folded over a bed scattered with rose petals. To the outside world, everything was perfect. But perfection is often an illusion. Security cameras show the couple entering the suite just before 12:30 a.m. Ananya walks ahead, her veil now resting on her shoulders, her smile tight, forced. Arjun follows, hands in his pockets, his gaze locked on the back of her head. They close the door, and the truth, long buried, begins to rise. Inside the room, police reports later revealed, the confrontation began almost immediately. Whether it was a whispered confession, a clumsy lie that slipped out, or a damning message Arjun found on her phone, something cracked. One theory suggests Arjun had received a call earlier that day, perhaps from a cousin or friend who had stumbled across a rumor on social media, or from someone in India who hinted that the virginity certificate sent by Ananya was fake. Another version suggests he overheard her speaking with her bridesmaid in hushed tones about the document. Whatever triggered it, The argument began with questions. Then came the rage. Neighbors in adjacent rooms later told police they heard shouting around 1:00 a.m., a man's voice, raised and furious, followed by a woman crying, pleading. One guest said he heard a loud crash, like a mirror shattering. Another thought it was just a drunk couple fighting. No one intervened. Inside the suite, chaos unfolded. Police photographs taken the next day show the aftermath. A broken glass table near the foot of the bed. Bridal jewelry scattered across the floor, one earring bent, one necklace broken. Blood smeared on the edge of a bedside table. The bedsheet partially torn, with strands of hair embedded in the fabric. A full-length mirror shattered into dozens of pieces. The autopsy later revealed the cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head combined with manual asphyxiation. Ananya had fought back. Police concluded bruises on her arms and hands suggested a struggle, but the assault had been sudden and violent. By 2:15 a.m. it was over. Arjun didn't flee, he didn't try to cover it up. Instead, according to police transcripts, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to his father in Amritsar. Through tears, he told him, "I did what I had to do. She lied. She made me a joke in front of God." His father begged him to stay calm, to call the police. Arjun hung up. The second call was to emergency services. He spoke slowly, as if dazed. "My wife is dead," he said. "I killed her." When police arrived at 2:35 a.m., they found Arjun sitting at the foot of the bed, still in his wedding sherwani, blood on his cuffs. He did not resist arrest. He did not deny the act. He only asked one question. "Will they take me back to India?" Later in interrogation, Arjun broke down repeatedly. "She lied," he repeated over and over. "She sent me a fake certificate. She made me a fool in front of my family, in front of God." Investigators were chilled by his calm recounting of events, the way he framed the violence not as a loss of control, but as justice. A detective close to the case later said, "It wasn't just a murder. It was an execution of what he thought was betrayal. His pride was the judge, his hands were the punishment." Outside the hotel, media vans arrived within hours. Headlines erupted. Bride murdered on wedding night in London hotel, groom confesses. Fake virginity certificate AT center of tragic honor killing. The city awoke to a nightmare wrapped in silk and stained with blood. And behind the police tape, a wedding suite transformed into a crime scene remained still. The rose petals wilted, the champagne untouched, the future broken beyond repair. As dawn broke over London, Scotland Yard had already taken over the case. The hotel suite was cordoned off, and forensic teams began combing the room for evidence. It was clear from the start that this wasn't a robbery, nor a random act of violence. Everything pointed to a single moment of fury, one rooted in betrayal, pride, and cultural expectation. The media was quick to pounce. Within hours, headlines had flooded both British and Indian news outlets. Bride murdered on wedding night, honor or homicide. Arranged marriage TURNS deadly in London hotel. Indian groom KILLS wife over fake virginity certificate. Detective Inspector Louise Hammond, head of the Major Crimes Unit, addressed reporters outside the hotel that afternoon. This appears to be a case where cultural expectations and personal dishonesty collided with deadly consequences. Our job is not to judge customs, but to enforce the law. Behind the scenes, the investigation moved quickly. Arjun Singh had confessed during his 999 call, and during initial questioning, he didn't deny what he had done. He told officers he felt tricked, humiliated, and shamed, that his wife had violated trust. Still, investigators knew a confession wasn't enough. They needed a complete timeline and motive. Forensic teams recovered the couple's devices. It was on Ananya's personal laptop that they found a PDF file buried in a documents folder, a scanned and edited certificate from a clinic in Delhi. Metadata showed it had been created just 10 days before the wedding and altered using a basic image editing app. Text messages on her phone painted a fuller picture. Chats with a close friend back in India revealed her fear of being rejected. "I can't tell them. If they find out, the wedding will be off. My parents will disown me. I got the document. It looks real. They won't know." More messages confirmed that she had shared the file with Arjun's family weeks earlier, when his mother requested medical proof of her purity. A chilling detail that underscored the cultural pressure weighing on both bride and groom. The autopsy confirmed blunt force trauma to the head and manual strangulation. Crucially, it also confirmed there was no sexual activity that night, consensual or otherwise, challenging early tabloid speculation that the murder had occurred during intimacy or due to physical evidence of past relationships. This was not a crime of passion triggered in the moment of discovery, but rather a rage killing fueled by deep-seated beliefs. Public reaction was divided. Some commentators, particularly in South Asian diaspora communities, condemned the act outright. "This was murder. There's no excuse," said one UK-based women's rights activist. Others, disturbingly, expressed partial sympathy, blaming Ananya for lying or bringing dishonor, exposing the darker veins of patriarchal thinking still embedded in parts of both cultures. Sociologists and psychologists weighed in. Dr. Nina Suresh, a British Indian clinical psychologist, told the BBC, "What we see here is a textbook case of honor-based violence, not just imported from home countries, but deeply internalized in the diaspora. Men are conditioned to believe their masculinity is tied to controlling women's sexuality. When that illusion is shattered, violence becomes their means of reclaiming pride." In further interrogations, Arjun alternated between remorse and rationalization. "I didn't plan it," he said, "but she humiliated me. She made me look like a fool in front of my family. She lied to me about her purity." Detectives noted how he rarely referred to Ananya by name, instead calling her the girl or the bride. To him, she had become less a partner and more a symbol of broken expectations, a symbol of dishonor. And that made her, in his eyes, expendable. The trial of Arjun Singh began 6 months after the night that ended in tragedy. The courtroom at the Old Bailey was filled with tension, a collision of two cultures, two families, and one irreversible act. Media vans parked outside every day, reporters filing daily updates on what had quickly become one of the most talked-about cases of honor-based violence in the UK in recent years. Arjun appeared in court in a plain suit, clean-shaven and calm, his expression unreadable. Gone was the groom from the wedding photos, smiling in a cream sherwani, hands folded around his bride. In his place stood a man accused of killing his wife on the very night they had taken their vows. The prosecution, led by Crown Prosecutor Abigail Holmes, delivered a sharp and unrelenting case. "This was not simply a marriage gone wrong," she told the jury. "This was a murder born of toxic masculinity, cultural obsession with purity, and a man's inability to tolerate the truth." She painted Arjun as a man obsessed with the idea of control, a groom who expected perfection, and when presented with a woman who dared to hide her sexual past out of fear, responded with deadly rage. She detailed the physical evidence, the fake virginity certificate, the text messages, and his confession, all of which together left little room for doubt that he had acted violently and intentionally. But the defense struck a different tone. Arjun's barrister, Martin Langley, argued that his client had suffered a severe emotional breakdown triggered by betrayal. "This was a crime of passion," he said, "a spontaneous, tragic explosion of emotion from a man pushed beyond his breaking point." Langley cited Arjun's cultural upbringing, the pressure of preserving family honor, and the psychological impact of the perceived deceit. To support their case, the defense brought in a clinical psychologist who testified that Arjun experienced temporary dissociation, a psychological state where reason and emotion separate under intense emotional stress. But the prosecution countered with a forensic expert who emphasized that while the act was impulsive, it was still violent, excessive, and devastating. One of the most heart-wrenching moments came when Ananya's best friend, Rhea Kapoor, testified. Fighting through tears, she recounted late-night conversations in the weeks before the wedding. She was scared, Rhea said. She told me she wasn't proud of the lie, but she didn't feel like she had a choice. She thought if they found out, everything would be over. The courtroom fell silent as Ananya's parents took the stand. Her mother wept openly, clutching her daughter's wedding photo. She was trying to start a new life, she said. We raised her with honor. She didn't deserve this. Courtroom sketches depicted a split image, Arjun looking down at the floor, unmoving, while Ananya's father stared straight ahead, fists clenched. Public reaction to the trial was polarized. Women's rights groups gathered outside the courthouse daily, holding signs reading, "Virginity is not a death sentence," and "Stop honor killings in modern Britain." Meanwhile, some online voices debated the cultural complexities, questioning how shame, masculinity, and arranged marriage customs contributed to the outcome. After nearly 2 weeks of testimony and 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: guilty of manslaughter, not murder. The court acknowledged that while Arjun had acted in a fit of rage and his actions were not premeditated, the brutality of the killing warranted a serious sentence. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. As the judge read the sentence, Ananya's mother let out a sharp cry, a mix of anguish and release, collapsing in her husband's arms. Arjun showed little emotion. Only when he was led away did he look back briefly at the photo of his wedding day on the courtroom evidence table. It was a day that had begun in celebration and ended in death. Now it would end again, this time with judgment, and still there were no winners, only silence. The trial ended, but the ripples of Ananya Mehra's death continued to spread far beyond the courtroom. Her murder became more than just a tragic crime. It became a cultural flashpoint, a case that sparked uncomfortable conversations in both Britain and India about honor, control, and the violence cloaked in tradition. Newspapers across the world ran headlines not just about the killing, but about the underlying cause: a virginity test. "A ritual of shame ends in blood," read one British tabloid. "Virginity obsession kills Indian bride in London," declared an editorial in a Delhi daily. Television debates, op-eds, and podcasts began asking hard questions. Why do some communities still demand proof of purity? How much pressure do immigrant families place on their children to uphold outdated ideals? Where does tradition end and tyranny begin? Outside the Old Bailey, women's rights activists held silent vigils in memory of Ananya. They carried placards that read, "Virginity is a myth, not a measure, and purity culture is violence." In India, protests erupted outside clinics known to issue virginity certificates, with activists calling for legislation banning the practice. Sociologists pointed to a larger trend: the rising number of honor-related crimes in immigrant communities across Europe and North America. "This wasn't just one man killing his wife," said Professor Mira Vassant, a sociologist at the University of London. "This was centuries of patriarchy, shame, and control exploding in a bedroom in East London. The tragedy is that the tools of oppression, like virginity tests, are still alive, even in so-called progressive societies." The psychological toll on both families was immense. Ananya's parents withdrew from public life entirely, their home in Delhi shuttered and silent. Relatives said they lived in guilt, not just over losing their daughter, but for the pressures they unknowingly helped enforce. Arjun's family, meanwhile, publicly defended him. His mother, in a tearful interview, said, "He lost his mind. She lied to him. What was he supposed to do?" Her words ignited further backlash, seen by many as proof of how deeply rooted the blame culture around women's choices still is. Months later, a short documentary aired, titled "The Last Lie: The Murder of Ananya Mehra." It ended with a haunting voiceover as black and white wedding photos faded into darkness. In the end, it wasn't love or hate that killed her, it was a lie forced by fear, a fear taught to her since birth, a fear that silence could keep her safe. But silence, it turned out, was never safe. In the quiet aftermath, when the courtroom has emptied and the headlines have faded, all that remains is the silence. A silence louder than the chants of protesters, deeper than the sobs of grieving parents, more permanent than the sentence handed down. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a union of families, cultures, and dreams. A wedding meant to celebrate love, respect, and trust. But in the end, it became a ceremony of secrets and shame. One lie born not of malice, but of fear, became the fault line that split two lives apart. A fear taught since childhood, whispered between generations, that a woman's worth lies in what her body has not done. That honor rests between her legs, and if that honor is questioned, her life is forfeited. Ananya Mehra did not die because she was unworthy. She died because she lived in a world where the truth is punished and silence is encouraged, where men are forgiven for violence, but women are condemned for the past. And Arjun Singh, raised with pride, tradition, and a code of honor twisted into expectation, became a weapon sharpened by shame. He was not born a killer. But when pride collided with a secret, when control unraveled, he chose destruction over forgiveness. In a police storage room sits a red bridal lehenga, folded and stained, stored among evidence bags and crime scene files. A gown meant for love, now reduced to proof. In the city of second chances, a bride's past couldn't escape her, and a husband's pride couldn't forgive her. This was not just a wedding night. It was a funeral for truth, buried in velvet and sealed with silence.